You're listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. Episode 34, Emperors, Fools, and Angels. This is the conclusion to a 2-episode arc about tarot symbolism in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So if you missed episode 33, you should go back. Anytime you want to listen or re-listen to any episode, just go to the Quantum Harry Twitter page at QHPodcast and click on the link in the pinned tweet to go to the Quantum Harry episode guide, which has links to all of the episodes in audio and video formats, plus links to blog posts related to some of the episodes. There are also images of the tarot cards on the Quantum Harry blog, my Instagram account, the Quantum Harry Pinterest board, and the Quantum Harry Facebook group. And when the video version of this episode is posted on YouTube, you'll be able to see all of the images I'm talking about in the video. Last time I began talking about cards in the Tarot Major Arcana whose symbolism can help illuminate various plot points in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, specifically the cards of the second vertical column in our 3x7 grid of Tarot Major Arcana cards, the ones numbered 1 to 21. This time I'll examine the sequential cards for the second book, the cards numbered 4, 5, and 6, plus the cards linked numerically to those cards. And finally, I'll look at the Horcrux that aligns with the second book, and how the imagery on the tarot cards linked to this book can help illuminate the link between that Horcrux and the DA teacher in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Gilderoy Lockhart. The cards numbered 1, 2, and 3, the Magician, High Priestess, and Empress, were the sequence cards for the first book in the Harry Potter series, as I talked about in episode 32, The Mirror and the Stone. The next 3 cards, 4, 5, and 6, are the Emperor, the seed card for this book, the High Priest, also called the Hierophant or Pope, and the Lover's card. In her book, Jung and Tarot, An Archetypal Journey, Sally Nichols writes, "Culturally, as well as personally, the Emperor's number 4 heralds a new beginning." The Emperor is usually depicted sitting on a throne with symbols of his office, a scepter, and sometimes also a shield, which may display an eagle, although if there is no shield, there may be a statue of an eagle or the image of a live bird who's present with the Emperor. There are also often ram's heads on the arms of his throne, which connects the Emperor to Ares, the Greek god of war, as well as to the astrological sign of Aries, just as the Justice card is related to the sign of Libra and the Moon card to the sign of Cancer. In episode 18, The Wide World, I talked about how the number 4 is how humans have described the world for a very long time. The 4 corners of the earth, the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 elements of fire, air, water, and earth, before modern times and the advent of the periodic table of elements. A symbol for the earth, a circle with a cross inscribed inside it, like the logo for this podcast, divides the world into 4 quadrants. Since the Emperor on the 4th card is the symbolic ruler of the entire world, the symbolism on this card is concerned with the protagonist of the tarot story going out to confront the world. Arthur Weasley is just one character who embodies the Emperor. He's also a father, the archetype that's equivalent to the tarot archetype of the Emperor. Arthur is the person responsible for much of Harry's new experience of the wizarding world outside of Hogwarts in Chamber of Secrets. After Ron and the twins arrive at Harry's house in the magical car/chariot that Arthur Weasley created, they take Harry the Hermit, who's no longer locked up on Privet Drive, to the Burrow, home of the Weasleys. Here Harry finds countless magical gadgets, talking mirrors, dishes washing themselves, and knitting needles that seem to be on autopilot. Harry also meets Arthur at last, a literal as well as archetypal father. Harry's horizons will be broadened even more as the series continues, especially in the 4th book, which is ruled by the father archetype, as well as being ruled by the Emperor card. But he witnesses something new and important in the 2nd book, daily life in a wizarding home, the type of home in which he would have grown up if his parents hadn't been murdered. Harry travels by Floo, Floo, for the first time in Chamber of Secrets, which is something most wizards seem to take for granted, and which can be considered another sort of chariot, the card numerically linked to the card at the bottom of the second column, the Tower, since the Floo network is a way of traveling that is controlled by magic. Harry shops with the Weasleys in Diagon Alley and witnesses Arthur, who shares a name with the legendary King Arthur, fighting with another archetypal father/emperor, Lucius Malfoy, who uses the ensuing chaos as an opportunity to slip Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny's cauldron. And as I mentioned in the last episode, Ron and Harry also go to Hogwarts in the chariot that is Arthur's magical car when they cannot get onto the platform to board the school train. Even when he's not present, Arthur's influence runs deep in Harry's life in the second book of the series. The cards that are linked to the Emperor, card number 4, are Death, card number 13, because 1 + 3 is 4, and the Fool, since when it's numbered, it's labeled 22, and 2 + 2 is 4. The Fool card being involved here, though tangentially, is particularly interesting because of the tight link historically between a ruler and the court jester, or the Fool, who is often the only one able to offer counsel to the ruler without losing his head if his boss disagrees with him. There's a symbiotic relationship between a ruler and a fool. Peeves usually embodies the tarot archetype of the Fool, but at times Arthur is both fool and emperor, asking Harry many strange questions about muggles on the one hand, but also giving Ginny sage advice about not trusting something that can think for itself if she can't see where it keeps its brain. The link that the Death card, the other one that adds up to 4, has to this book takes us back to the petrifaction victims, frozen statues who seem to be dead. Death is in fact stalking Hogwarts corridors, and its victims are frozen in an imitation of death. Ginny is also in a virtual death until Harry destroys the diary Horcrux that has sapped her life force, after which she awakens. Death appears in many other forms in this book. The roosters at the castle all mysteriously turn up dead, because when Tom Riddle possesses Ginny, he has her kill them, since the rooster's crow is fatal to the basilisk. Myrtle, the gatekeeper to the Chamber of Secrets, is also dead, as is Nearly Headless Nick. Harry goes to Nick's Death Day party, and encounters many ghosts there. And finally, Harry is pierced by a basilisk fang at the same time that he kills the basilisk, but he's saved from death this time by Phoenix Tears, by Fawkes. The High Priest on card number 5, the second sequence card linked to Chamber of Secrets, is yet another holy man Harry embodies in this book, which is fitting since he has his spiritual coming of age here, foreshadowed by Ron making him a bishop in the life-sized chess game in the previous book. As I talked about in episode 13, Deus Ex Machina, in the chamber, Harry voices his faith in the god figure, Dumbledore, which brings Fawkes to Harry, a symbolic Holy Spirit. Unlike in the story of Pentecost, however, Harry doesn't receive the ability to speak to the other at this time. He can already do this, having used his Parseltongue ability to access the chamber. Like the High Priestess, the High Priest sits between two pillars, an indication that he is the gatekeeper to another realm. He holds up 2 fingers, leaving 2 pointing downward, symbolizing his being a bridge between heaven and earth, a liminal being. A triple crown sits on his head, probably a reference to the Trinity, and the keys to heaven are at his feet, another mark of someone who is a gatekeeper. The Threshold Guardian Hagrid, for instance, another liminal being, is known as Keeper of the Keys, which is also a title of Saint Peter, who's supposed to be waiting for the newly dead at the pearly gates of heaven. On many High Priest cards, 2 monks kneel facing him. Unlike the Devil's Companions, they are not chained. They have chosen freely to be with the High Priest, just as Ron and Hermione choose to be Harry's friends and allies. As a liminal being, Harry is repeatedly in an intermediary role in all of the books, which is the job of a holy person, though he isn't the only one who fills that role in this book or in the 5th book, which will be ruled by the High Priest card. He regularly intercedes for others, such as when he frees Dobby. Dumbledore, another High Priest, also intercedes on others' behalf. Grimm's version of Little Red Riding Hood, into which Wilhelm Grimm inserted the character of the woodsman to save Red from the metaphorical hell of the wolf's belly, is retold with Harry as that woodsman, Grimm's Christ figure, a holy man and high priest, while Riddle is the wolf and Ginny is Little Red Riding Hood. Dumbledore also being a high priest positions Harry to succeed him. Just as Dumbledore intercedes for his people and serves Hogwarts as its leader and head teacher, Harry will take on that role in the 5th book as head of Dumbledore's army. The card linked to the High Priest, card number 5, is Temperance, card number 14, because 1 + 4 = 5. The angel Temperance, as it is often called, shows an angel with a third eye on the brow, which points to Temperance also being an intermediary between worlds, which is the tarot equivalent of the archetype of the crone. Harry, as a speaker of Parseltongue, is also symbolized easily by the angel Temperance, and the liquid that is usually depicted on this card freely flowing between the vessels in the angel's hands could even be symbolically linked to the polyjuice potion that Harry and Ron used to infiltrate the Slytherin common room, which is another act of bridging. They infiltrate a world they usually cannot enter. Harry and Ron going to the Slytherin common room foreshadows both their foray into the forest, when they encounter the giant spiders and must be rescued by the flying Ford Anglia, and when Harry later enters the Slytherin-created Chamber of Secrets, which can only be accessed by someone who can say the word for open in Parseltongue, something Harry does naturally and without effort now, but something that Ron also manages to learn to do in Deathly Hallows, which allows him to repeat Harry's coming of age from the 2nd book, though Hermione is the one to destroy a Horcrux in that sequence of events. In episode 31, The Devil You Know, I talked about how the symbols for the 4 evangelists, which are seen on more than one Tarot Major Arcana card as a collective symbol of wholeness, link one of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, to each Hogwarts house. The symbol of the winged man or angel is the one linked to Slytherin House, and Snape, the head of house for Slytherin, is an archetypal crone, as I talked about in episode 6, A Murder of Crones. As I already said, the tarot equivalent of the archetype of the crone is the Temperance card, and again we can see the liquid flowing between the angel's vessels as potions. So in addition to Harry's liminality and the polyjuice potion he and Ron use to see into another realm, as the angel Temperance does with that third eye, the Temperance card could also be a reference to the archetypal crone and Slytherin potions master, Severus Snape, who, in Chamber of Secrets, teaches both Harry and Draco the disarming charm in the only meeting of the dueling club. Without learning this spell, neither the linked wands at the climax of the 4th book nor Draco disarming Dumbledore and becoming master of the Elder Wand in the 6th would be possible, and both are necessary to Harry's eventual victory over Voldemort. On the 3rd sequential card, The Lovers, there's often a picture of a young man choosing between an older woman and a younger woman. There's also a Cupid figure armed with arrows in the sky above him, sometimes peeking over a cloud, instigating the romantic story on the card. Some versions depict Adam, Eve, and a tree with a large winged angel in the sky above. A serpent is entwined around the tree, the serpent who tempted Eve, which could be another link to this book being a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, because the little girl is supposed to be a representative of prelapsarian innocence, or the innocence that Adam and Eve had before the fall, before they knew the difference between right and wrong. Whether it's the version with the young man choosing between 2 women, or Adam, Eve, and the serpent, this card is about choices. Near the end of Chamber of Secrets, Harry is worried about having been sorted into the wrong house, but Dumbledore says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." The Lovers card also connects to Harry and Ginny, who play counterparts here, but don't become a couple until the 6th book. However, the most sought-after character romantically is probably Gilderoy Lockhart, with whom numerous people in this book are openly smitten, including Hermione, the embodiment of the Empress, and on many versions of the Empress card, beside her throne, is a large heart. We can surmise that Hermione sends Lockhart a valentine because when Harry and Ron ask her if she did, she turns red and stammers. Mrs. Weasley, another mother/empress, is also quite taken by Lockhart. Adding to this theme, Ginny accidentally finds Percy and his girlfriend Penelope kissing, which explains Harry and Ron discovering them sneaking about in the dungeons separately before or after a tryst. The presence of the Lovers card here foreshadows events in the 6th book, which mirrors the 2nd in many ways, not just by having a tower thrusting out of the earth rather than inside it. The idea of Ginny and Harry being romantically involved is introduced here and comes to fruition in the 6th book. There's even a Cupid involved in Harry and Ginny's relationship in the 2nd book, and remember there is a Cupid figure on the version of the card with the young man choosing between 2 women. Gilderoy Lockhart hires dwarves dressed as slightly sinister Cupids to run around the castle delivering cards and gifts on Valentine's Day, and one of these Cupids delivers Ginny's singing Valentine to Harry. Plus, the first time that Ginny speaks in front of Harry, she defends him from Draco Malfoy, who responds by telling Harry that he's got, quote, a girlfriend. When Harry is confronted with the evidence that Ginny fancies him, he always regards her favorably, though receiving a singing Valentine in public is a rather embarrassing situation for a 12-year-old boy to be in. When he rescues her in the chamber, it is in a place of abundant sexual symbolism, as I mentioned in episode 13, Deus Ex Machina. The chamber is also where Ron and Hermione go before the first time they kiss in the 7th book. So while Harry as someone involved in romance is only a tangential part of the 2nd book, this introduction to the issue prepares us for the 6th book to be ruled by the Lovers card. The Lovers, card number 6, is linked to the Devil, card number 15, because 1 + 5 = 6, which again brings us back to Tom Riddle, snakes as wolves and wolves as snakes, and the Little Red Riding Hood theme that permeates the entire 2nd book and is repeated more than once in the narrative. Harry is entangled with the snitch from the time of his first Quidditch match, as I talked about in Episode 1, The Kids' Table, and in Episode 11, War Games. In Chamber of Secrets, he collides with and becomes entangled with another item that Dumbledore bequeaths to him, the Sword of Gryffindor. Of the 6 Horcruxes that Voldemort meant to make, 4 were to have links to the Hogwarts houses: Ravenclaw's diadem, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, and, if he'd managed it, which he may have thought possible if he'd become the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, the Sword of Gryffindor. Instead, Harry metaphorically collides with the sword in the 2nd book, and by virtue of becoming entangled with the sword, becomes, in essence, a human Sword of Gryffindor himself. Ironically, Harry, the ultimate Gryffindor, is also a Horcrux, a vessel containing a piece of Voldemort's soul, and the same sword that Voldemort sought to make into a Horcrux becomes the destroyer of more than one Horcrux, just as Harry is the means by which more than one Horcrux, including himself, are destroyed. Harry's lightning bolt scar is one of the things that marks him as a human sword. Joseph Campbell calls the sword, quote, the counterpart of the thunderbolt, by which he seems to mean a lightning bolt. In the end, Voldemort does make a Sword of Gryffindor, which is to say Harry, into a Horcrux, just not the Sword of Gryffindor. In the 2nd book, the Horcrux that Harry destroys, Tom Riddle's diary, is dispatched by a doppelganger for Gryffindor's sword, a basilisk fang. Aligning this Horcrux with the 2nd book may seem overly obvious, since it definitely drives the action, but that's not the only reason that the diary is the Horcrux that aligns with the 2nd book. On the High Priestess card, the ruling card for Chamber of Secrets, she holds a book, which we can see as the diary. But the High Priestess's book can also link to this book's Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Gilderoy Lockhart, who is famous for writing books. Like the diary in which Ginny and Harry write, Lockhart's books mislead people. He did not perform the feats in them, but he found those who did interviewed them and used memory charms so that they no longer remembered what they'd done, as I talked about in the last episode. This is a reversal of the scene from the past that Harry observes through the medium of the diary, in which young Tom Riddle does not take credit for what he's done, releasing the basilisk, and instead deflects blame onto Hagrid. Riddle's quote-unquote memory, which is to say the piece of his soul that's in the diary, is then destroyed by the fang of the animal Riddle attempted to use as a weapon against others, while Lockhart's memory is destroyed by his own spell when he attempts to use Ron's malfunctioning wand to cast a memory charm on Ron and Harry. As Dumbledore puts it, "Impaled upon your own sword, Gilderoy!" When he hears this, the confused Lockhart immediately says that he doesn't have a sword, but Harry does, since he's still holding the Sword of Gryffindor. This allows the reader to equate the Sword of Gryffindor with the basilisk fang that destroys the quote-unquote memory of Tom Riddle, just as basilisk fangs and this sword are equated during the Horcrux hunt in the 7th book. That parallel is first presented at the end of Chamber of Secrets. So in the 2nd book of the series, which is ruled by the High Priestess, an archetypal maiden, the book on her lap ties together a defense against the dark arts teacher, who is credited with many books, and the diary Horcrux, both of whom lose their memories by being impaled upon their own swords, literal and metaphorical. You've been listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. All music heard on Quantum Harry is composed and performed by B.L. Purdom. Whether you are streaming on iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, or another podcatcher, please leave a rating and/or a comment and share episodes of Quantum Harry with your friends. Next time on Quantum Harry, episode 35, Prisoner of Time, part 1 of a 2-episode arc about tarot imagery in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I hope you'll join me.